Hi, this is Brandon Spilley from thirstgym.com. Today we're talking about an exercise called the Swiss bar bench press. This is my preferred upper body pressing exercise for athletes and clients. I think it has tremendous ability to let people press even with shoulder problems. It's also super versatile in terms of what you can do with this bar in general, but the bench press I think tends to lend itself for the average person wanting to use a Swiss bar over a traditional barbell, and we're going to talk about why and then the execution here. So the Swiss bar, for us, see them called different names. Basically has a neutral grips here. So we've got 3 individual handles on this particular bar from Elite FTS. We've also got a V handle that would be good for like curls or skull crushers, things of that nature. And each handle is a little bit different width and thickness. So that's just mainly designed based upon where your hands are and the way it's going to feel. Obviously, as you get closer, this is more tricep oriented, and as you get wider, you're going to start looking at a little bit more chest work because of that, but also because of your athlete, it may depend upon which handle they need to be in a relatively good position. So, but the barbell just goes in the rack like a standard barbell after that. And the reason we like the Swiss bar so much here at Thirst is because it puts our hands in an externally rotated position. So the downfall to the bench press in general is the fact that we're in an internally rotated position, and then when we go down, the head of that humerus begins to translate forward, and as we get down there, especially if we're not in a good, strong bench press position, this starts to come forward, and then we're internally rotated. We've got a bad position here. So, learning how to bench press correctly is very important just in general because of the way you should set up and the way your humerus should be set. You can avoid some of those problems with a proper setup. However, most people screw that up. When you're working with athletes and clients, sometimes you just want to give them the easiest way to make progress. A lot of times it's doing the hard work for them. In this case, that's why I think the Swiss bar is fantastic, because it gets us in that externally rotated position, which makes it safer on the shoulder. However, you're not going to be able to use as much weight that way because of the way the Swiss bar is going to orient that, and it's going to make it very tricep dominant. It's obviously not going to hit the pecs as hard as a regular bench press, but if you're trying to work on pressing power, for most of your athletes, their hands are going to be more in when they have to go to push, throw, defend people. They're not going to be like this when they go to press. So I think this is a safer alternative in the long run if you want your athletes to press. We've also talked about the Swiss bar floor press, which in my opinion I think is the preferred method to teach kids how to press with weights first and foremost, and then you can get them to a bench press if you need to. Because even with a good setup, you could potentially start to see that arm come really far back behind the body, and you could still potentially have some issues. You shouldn't, but it could still potentially be there, so just be aware of that. But when it comes to execution, we'll talk about this now. So I got the bar in the rack. I'm going to be on the bench. Step number 1 is to get my shoulders set. So I'm going to pull the bar forward in the front of the rack. I'm going to get my shoulders pinned together. So I'm going to feel all the pressure here on my traps and my triceps. I'm going to drop my butt, drop my feet into position. Feet is entirely up to you, your athlete, your client, how you want to coach it, whether you're tucked, wide, out in front. I prefer flat-footed, a little bit out wide. That way you can feel your hips involved. You can get some leg drive if you need to, but it doesn't need to be like overanalyzed. And that way I'm also not overarching through my low back. If we're working with athletic populations, that may be not what we're after. We're really looking for upper body strength. So as long as we've got a good setup that's safe, we're okay. Our shoulders together. That's where you're going to select your handle of choice. So, just my standard handle for me is right here, the middle one. I'm just going to unrack the bar here, bring it out forward. Notice that my shoulders are retracted. Notice I'm not like this. Okay, this is the biggest thing you have to coach your athletes on. So we don't want to start from this position. We want to get those shoulders retracted, pulled back, down towards our back pocket. That immediately removes some range of motion, but also is going to keep our shoulder safer in the long run. I'm going to come down. The Swiss bar is going to do most of the tracking for you, so generally your elbows are just going to come straight down. They're going to be right underneath your wrist. Many athletes are going to have a problem. They're going to try to almost JM press this. The bar is going to come down, but their elbows are going to shoot forward. Make sure it's okay that that bar comes down to basically the bottom of the rib cage right here. That's entirely okay, because we got to remember the center of the mass of the barbell is going to end up at nipple level or slightly lower, even though part of the barbell is going to be down here at the bottom of the rib cage, but down by our xiphoid process. That's entirely okay. So we're going to be here, touch, and then back. So notice you don't want to let it roll like this. I think that's another problem athletes have, is that when they touch, they're going to let that little arch they have, shove their hands back, and then when they go to press, they get stuck. Okay? Squeeze that bar hard, just tap, and go. Another consideration is that when athletes have never used a Swiss bar before, you will immediately see their rotator cuff inability to stabilize or the lack thereof. A lot of times when people grab this bar, they start getting really shaky. You can tell that their rotator cuff and their shoulder stabilizers have not really had to do any kind of work like that in the past to work to stabilize the unit then while you have your major muscles performing majority of the movement. You will have to teach them to squeeze hard, get that irritation, make sure that runs down the chain to help stabilize the shoulder joint as you go to press to be able to load this up a little bit better. Obviously for a powerlifter that's way more important, decreasing range of motion, all that becomes vastly more important in terms of a training effect. If you are an athlete or a client though, usually just a little bit of scapular retraction, a decent setup, a little bit of foot pressure to me is all they need. They're not powerlifters, so we're not going to overcoach that. If powerlifters they want to be, then we obviously will work with them on that. But for your average athlete, I think as long as you got foot pressure, butts down, shoulders are retracted back and down at a moderate degree, and they're able to control that barbell, you're going to be completely okay. You don't need to overcoach that. The other nice thing about this has got the gamut in terms of how you want to program it. Because it's a barbell exercise, your options are unlimited. You can add bands, chains, reverse bands. You can obviously got a variety of grips, so you can start playing with those. You can implement pauses. You can have them on the pins. In terms of your sets and reps, this is usually our strength exercise for our athletes and our clients. So those usually see 3, 4, sometimes 5 sets, anywhere from 3 to 5, maybe 6 reps for some of our athletes and our clients. Very rarely is this something we're going to program for past 8s. I think if we're looking at hypertrophy work, we'd much rather use dumbbells and push-ups and other pressing exercises that are a little bit safer. But also we got to remember that we're just after hypertrophy work here. The more reps that you start getting in with a barbell exercise, the more chances you have for something to go wrong, especially when we're talking with a younger population that we happen to work with. So you've got plenty of options here with this barbell. I really, really prefer the Swiss bar bench press over probably any other pressing option for the average person, the average athlete, the average adult. I think this is your go-to, and if you want to press horizontally, if you're a power lifter, this might be an exercise that you use if you've got some banged up shoulders, tendonitis is starting to bother you, you're just trying to find a workaround to still be able to press safely and effectively. I think this will buy you some years in your shoulders if you happen to be a competitive powerlifter, especially if you start mixing it in with the floor press and adding some bands and chains to even get that stress on the shoulder joint even less in the bottom. I think you'll see some longevity there. So that's the Swiss bar bench press. A lot of information there thrown at you, but if you have any questions about it, feel free to leave them in the comment section. Thanks. Have a great day.